We're ready. Yes. And we're all sitting straight with our feet on the floor. That's good. Very good. Okay. And we're going to say the Pledge of Allegiance in just a minute, but before we do, we need IPSO announcements. Anybody from IPSO can inform us? No?
I'm from IPSO.
Do you have an announcement for us, Tony?
So our seminar, again, just to kind of reiterate, that is on March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. It will be at noon. And I believe we currently have it set up for the studio room. We're very excited to have Jason Franklin coming, and he's very excited to come as well. We are going to give him some questions that we sent out a survey. If you haven't responded to that, still, I guess, is time if you wanted to. If you have some burning question you'd like to ask an independent instructional designer, how he works in the world and what he does, we can probably still maybe fit those in. Trying to think if there's anything else about that. No, I don't believe so. So that is it. Mark that on your calendar, save the date. Oh, and we will not be broadcasting that on a webinar. We thought we might be, so that will not be over the internet. So please come in person if you want to watch it. Thanks.
Okay. And I've asked Tyler if he'll also give a prayer.
Our Father in heaven, we're very grateful to be here today as students on this campus to be blessed by the words of our speaker. We pray that my spirit will be with him as he presents the insights he has in his field of expertise. And we pray that we might be able to be inspired and find ways to connect this and glean insight that will bless our future lives and careers so that we can go out and serve the world and bless many others in return. We give thanks, Father, for the opportunity to be here now and say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Tyler. Our speaker today is a very special speaker, and I think you're going to enjoy him. Gary Seastrand is currently the Associate Director of the Center for Improvement of Teacher Education and Schooling.
And design.
And design. That's why he's
appealing to the audience.
He is formerly an assistant superintendent at the Alpine School District. He's in charge of buying. He was in charge. One of his responsibilities was buying furniture for the rooms. And he just told me about the coolest thing. And I told him that I thought that the guy that designed these chairs probably ought to be consigned to the outer darkness. Probably Gary's greatest achievement was getting a group of us, 2 vans full of us, from Oklahoma City after that big ice storm that they had in northern Texas. He drove us down there over 2 inches of ice through some harrowing experiences and made us feel good for 3 days while our clothes were off in Atlanta airport, and we were at a conference and our suitcases weren't. And he made us feel really good about that. And so he is a great person to be with, and you're going to enjoy listening to him.
Yeah, that's cool, Andy. Thanks for reminding me of that great adventure. That was an amazing experience to go with Andy to Dallas, and you have this expectation that Dallas is going to be really fun in December. It should be in the 70s. And that ice storm really frosted us, didn't it, so to speak. So to give you an idea of how dangerous it was, we finally found on our way from Oklahoma City to Dallas a little store that was open. We wanted to stop and get something to eat, a little like a 7-Eleven type deal. And one of the ladies gets out and she's wearing boots. And she steps out onto the ice and all of a sudden we see her start to slide backwards. I mean, she just... And so we linked arms and grabbed her and saved her from the big puddle that was at the end of the ice. We've had some great adventures. Okay, a little bit about me. I started my career as an elementary school teacher in Orem. I taught 4th grade and 6th grade. I was career 1. And when I think about instructional design, I didn't have to do much because there was a common core back then. It was called the textbook. Whatever the textbook said to do the next day, that's what I was going to do. So there was a lot of interest in wow, what do I do tomorrow? I was a brand new teacher and thinking, I just need to get through tomorrow. Then after 9.5 years of teaching, I went on sabbatical and completed a doctoral degree at the University of Utah in administration. And then I became a principal of an elementary school in Orem, Hillcrest Elementary, which is just south of University Mall, where that great big new fence is along University Parkway. So on the other side of that is a great little school, and I was a principal there for 8 years. After that, I was an assistant to the superintendent, and came in for 4 years and wrote policy, and went to the legislature and did things that the superintendent found distasteful. I actually found it was pretty fun. And after that, I became assistant superintendent of schools and educational services. So in Alpine District, right now that's the largest district in the state of Utah. They have about 73,000 students. And my job there was to supervise the supervisors, basically. So that was how I worked in the school system, anything to do with education, curriculum, professional development, school building. That's where I was telling Andy one of the fun jobs was working with architects to build schools. Those are opportunities that I had in my experience, and that was really, really fun. Architects are so fun to work with. They throw out ideas, and some of them are really crazy, and some are just very innovative and fun. Okay, so now I retired 2 years ago from Alpine District, and I'm at BYU here in the Center for the Improvement of Teacher Education and Schooling Department. Now you know that's a mouthful, so we call it SITES. I want to start just by reading to you something that was in last week's Education Week. K-12 and higher ed often fail to collaborate well, survey says. College and K-12 administrators know they need to work together to move the dial on student achievement, yet a new report shows many acknowledge they are not collaborating effectively. The article is kind of lengthy, but it gives some information that there's a disconnect. Hi, Tina. There's a disconnect often between what you hear at the university and what you hear in the K-12, and how do we connect and bridge those so that the disconnects disappear and we're better connected. And that's an exciting thing about the Brigham Young University Public School Partnership. It's 30 years old this year. In 1984, John Goodlad came to BYU on the invitation of the dean, and they brought superintendents from 5 school districts together. They met in a hotel in Provo, said, what do we have in common? And they identified some areas of common interest and concern. And from that, they formalized a partnership. The partnership was put into some type of a formal document, and a structure was created. So that's, right now, that's a partnership that includes about 30% of the students in the state of Utah, with Alpine School District, Provo School District, Nebo School District, that's Utah County, Wasatch School District, a rural district of about 5,500 students, and then you have Jordan School District, which is north of the point of the mountain. Welcome. So we serve about 30% of the total population in the state of Utah as a partnership. This is where the location is. You can see on a map those districts, and of course in relationship to Brigham Young University, how they fit in. We have a former board member from Provo District. Welcome. That's pretty cool to have you here.
I'm in the program.
I know. This is the program. That almost sounds like it could be a CIA movie, the program. The other thing that you have to consider about the partnership, it's related to preparing teachers. It's also related to helping teachers get better at what they do. And if you think about the preparation of teachers, it doesn't just happen in the School of Education, but across the campus, we have 7 other entities that are engaged in preparing teachers for teaching school. Most of those are secondary teachers that would prepare, but not all. So if you look at some of these other colleges that have teacher preparation programs, you can see that there's a real challenge in saying, okay, do we all have a connect with school districts? Do we understand what their needs are? Do the school districts have a connect with the university to say, you're doing a great job preparing, and we want your graduates, and this is what we can do collectively together. So this gives you a sense of the arts and sciences element. And then, of course, we have in the David O. McKay School of Education, 8 licensure programs. I thought there were only 7, but I talked to advisement today, and they said, you're missing one, P. So even physical education. So out of that, there are 8 licensure programs that come out of the College of Education and 2 endorsement areas, including teaching English as a second language and ELL. So there's a lot going on to prepare teachers for a career in education, and it's pretty diverse. This is a little sampling of the school districts. These are their numbers for this year in terms of enrollment. I mentioned that we have the largest district in the state with Alpine District is 72,467. When I was in Alpine District, we would grow about 2,400 students a year. Try to build buildings to keep up with that. Delana deals with charter schools online and says, hey, that helps keep a handle on growth in the state. Of course, not all districts grow like that in Utah, but within Utah County and West Jordan area, a lot of growth. We've got Nebo School District to the south of 31,000. Jordan District at one time was the largest school district, but they had a district split, and Canyons District left the Jordan in a split. And then we have Provo School District with about 15,000 students, and Wasatch, as I mentioned, with about 5,700 students. And that is a total enrollment of 177,000 students that we're working with. And we have about 200 schools and approximately 8,000 teachers that are out there teaching children. Teaching, any of you have children in any of these school districts? Just curious? Okay. So you want to make sure things go well, right? That's a big deal. So now that gives you a little sense of the membership of the partners school district. Now here's one of the most unique features of this partnership. It's unbelievable. 5 district superintendents once a month meet with the dean of the College of Education and the executive director of sites. Did you get that? Once a month. These are the people that make the most important decisions relative to the direction education will go for their districts for 1/3 of the students, and once a month they're together. And the dean is a big part of the conversation here. And we talk about some very interesting things, like what are we going to do with a new evaluation system for teachers, and will students coming out of the university understand what they're going to be evaluated on the year they graduate and come into the profession? That's an example. Do they understand standards of learning? Do they understand principles of professional learning communities and collaboration? Do they know what an IEP is? So you get all those kinds of things spinning around here. And this is probably one of the most envied pieces of the structure throughout the United States for the partnership, that you have this kind of commitment from superintendents and from the dean of the college. One of the major philosophies that's associated with the partnership is simultaneous renewal. Renewal is an interesting word, because right now I'm looking at trees and they're kind of still in their dormant stage, but they're only a few weeks away from renewing in terms of spring. The blossoms come out, the leaves start to pop, you see the tulips coming. Spring is a classic example of the sense of renewal, and renewal is invigorating. It represents change with some excitement and enthusiasm. I'm going to contrast that with the term reform. Reform is often mandated by an entity that often has no experience in dictating the changes that ought to occur. So the principle of renewal is the basis for which we function as a partnership, to say we're interested in continuously getting better at what we do. And the process we use for renewal is trying to help people find ways to improve practice do what they do in a positive way and not in a mandated way. That gives you a little sense of that. Please.
You use the terms, I was just going to ask, so I'm wondering, is there any difference between this and what industry often does in terms of continuous improvement?
Well, my sense of the connect between industry and education is pretty interesting because there are certain elements associated with schools that are unique. For example, the structure is called loosely coupled structure. A teacher can close the door and do whatever he or she wants, technically. There would be accountability at some point for some testing, but it's a pretty tight or pretty loose bureaucratic structure. And sometimes you don't get that in the business industry quite as much. If you'll notice some of the movement within industry now, they're getting to more loosely coupled with their employees. They have Innovation Day where half a day a week they can work on any project they want. So there's some relationships that are kind of intriguing, but the idea of renewal in the business sector, I can't speak too much toward that. I do know that education right now is consistently being asked to do different things, and typically the people asking aren't people that know education that well. As an example, education is public ed is highly influenced by legislative mandates that come out of the legislature. So I'll give you an example. There is really poor research on the outcomes of merit pay for teachers. Places where they do a value-added pay for teacher competence or skill really indicates that it's inconsistent, and over time there are some real fluctuations in the outcome. A good example is a teacher who recently wrote that last year on my value-added score I had the highest score in the district. This year I'm mediocre, I lost my merit pay. So I went from being one of the best to being mediocre in 1 year's time. And she was saying, what happened? I didn't teach anything differently. So there's some issues associated with that, but you get reform, areas of change, and people say, let's do this because this works in another context. Often that won't work in education. So there are differences. One of the things that we really value in our associates, in our partnership is an associates program. And the associates program is designed to pull people out of their context or environment for 10 days during the year and immerse them in conversations of depth focused specifically on commitments that we value as a partnership. And I'll cover those commitments in a little bit of time. But I remember the first time I went to an associates program. At the end of that year, I thought to myself, I finally have a language and an understanding of why I became a teacher. I can articulate that in ways that I never understood before. So one of the things that is most important to us in this partnership is to continue to push an agenda that helps people understand the commitments that we have for education. And that'll be fun for us to look at those. Those are the 5 commitments, and you'll see how those play out. The first one is civic preparation and engagement. A few years ago, I was in a conversation with the director of the museum at Idaho Falls. And he's a very intriguing man, very knowledgeable, has a PhD in zoology, and asked me some interesting questions. He said, tell me why you think public ed is important. And I proceeded to tell him a little bit about this first commitment where we help form a public. A public is actually created through education. If we didn't have schools and schooling opportunities, would we have a public? Would there be such a thing? So we talked a little bit about how we get the knowledge and skills to be a functioning member of society and have civility and be able to share different ideas or even have different points of view, and how critical that is within the context of an education process. So this is the first commitment that we talk a little bit about with them. We'll spend 2 days talking about that and what exactly are those dispositions needed.
how does a child being in a classroom at age 6, for example, start to build citizenship, start to build understanding of others? How does that differ and change when they become high school seniors and all through that process? Pretty powerful to think about the role of that plays in our society in developing that. And that there could be engagement. You know, one of the challenges we've got in Utah, you've been reading about Count My Vote initiative. Utah had in the past few years, has had the lowest voter percentage turnout in the United States. So people are saying, gosh, what's going on? Are we engaged citizens in this state or not? What's happening to us? And that prompted some of those conversations that led to an initiative. But there is that need to say, if you're going to be part of a society that values a democratic way of life, that takes some effort, and that takes some knowledge and education and some dispositions. Engagement, involvement. The next one is engaged learning through nurturing pedagogy. This would be particularly interesting, I think, for your focus that you have in your department. When we talk about design, engaged learning really could be a great door to walk through as you start to anticipate developing and designing systems for learning. How is it that you engage? How do you engage students, especially with technology? That's an important piece. And then the notion of nurturing pedagogy is really powerful, because what we know is students are highly influenced by a personal connection to the teacher or to a personal connect somewhere within a school. We have a lot of kids that stay in school because of a coach or because of a single classroom that otherwise might not even remain in school. I remember the former state superintendent of Utah schools, Jim Moss. He lived in Orem. I got to know him pretty well. And he told me one day that his son would drop out of school, but the art teacher has saved his life, has kept him in school, given him vision of what he could become. So that connect with the adult is really powerful. We call that a nurturing connection. It matters how we treat students. It matters what we say to them. The next commitment is access to knowledge, and this deals with, in a lot of ways, equity. How do we deal with equity? If I am the principal of a school where 90% of the children are on free lunch, and my scores are hovering around 60% proficiency, how does that compare to a school that has 98% of the students that are in the highest socioeconomic range and only 2% of their kids on free lunch, and their score is 98% in the proficiency? Are there some issues there we have to consider? And as an example, when I was on the budget committee for the school district, this is how this commitment played out in my life. I'm sitting there saying, in the past, we've just said every student's worth this much money to the school. Now we have to say something different. Wait a minute, this school needs compensatory help because of the challenges they face. How can we deal with that and respond to that? And out of that came a new, what I'd call a new design structure for schools. We lengthened the day of teachers, paid them 14.5% more, and minimized their class size by having kids come different times during the day. That was, some people would say that was inequitable because you're paying those teachers more. Yeah, that's right, and they stay in the school where it's the greatest need. So you start to see how these commitments and this way of thinking can play out in terms of education and the value there. The fourth commitment is stewardship. I love this word because it gives me such a biblical feeling. See how fun it is to be out of the secular world, but to be like me and talk about stewardship and the Bible and all that stuff. But stewardship is a responsibility. And we've talked to teachers in terms of what does it mean to continuously seek to improve your capacity as a teacher. your professional knowledge, your ability to work with kids, is that important? Is that a stewardship you have as a professional to get better at what you do? What does it mean if you are a teacher in a classroom, but you're part of a school of 30 other teachers? What's your stewardship with the whole? What does it mean if you're in a school district and you're part of a whole district of 3,000 teachers? Is there a stewardship? So those are the kinds of things that get covered in the notion of stewardship, and that children are a stewardship. And there's a need to be stewards of public education. Do we want to value public education? Does that mean something? One of the things we used to say to teachers when I was in Alpine District is, when you use the term the district, just remember that you are the district. That's you too. So if you say the district is making us or whatever else, just remember that the district is you. You are the district. Everybody that's in a district is the district. So you have to think about what your role is and what your stewardship is within that context. And then the last one, we mentioned renewal, but simultaneous renewal is really critical to us as a partnership. And that means that it's not just for existing teachers out in the field, but it's also for professors at the university that continue to push and extend new knowledge. It's part of research. It's part of a sense of commitment that we're all trying to get better at what we do. And that renewal piece is really, really an exciting way to term or to capture the idea of continuous improvement to me. Because it's a safe way to talk about it.
Another aspect of that too is that simultaneous part, which is we're not just renewing in and out by ourselves, but we're renewing together, so that we're forming that commitment of improving together and sharing.
Excellent, Randy. Randy actually was part of our group that wrote these commitments after studying them for a year. We studied the moral dimensions of teaching and wrote our commitments, and Randy, we had many conversations. So that's a great comment. It is about all three entities. Remember, I told you that there's the arts and sciences, the School of Education, and the public schools in this partnership. And simultaneous means all those entities are trying to collaborate together to improve what we do and the outcomes of learning. So this talks about that in terms of what we call a tripartite relationship. The tripartite is the arts and sciences, School of Education, and the school districts. And sites then is this little emblem is reflective of the three entities working toward the whole to improve student learning and help students reach their potential. No matter what students, university, graduate students, whatever else. So sites is a department within the College of Education. We're located on the first floor, and we function under the direction of the dean. We are really the group that gets a lot of work done in terms of what the partnership would like to see happen. We had a request to consider how multi-tiered system of support could be implemented within the school districts and what we need to do there. So we had a group meet together, and they start to say, how do we develop content? How would we unroll this professional development? What do we do there? We're what we call the operational arm of the partnership. This shows you where the structure fits. We're right here out of the public school partnership associated with the school, and we come here as the Center for Improvement of Teacher Ed, and then there are three aspects to sites: professional development, education support, and education research. Right now, if I had to tell you, I think the educational research has a ton of promise, and it's the weakest area of sites. We need to do more research, we need to do it better, and there's some real opportunity there within sites to expand the work of research. And EMIE the doctoral program there in terms of measurement, that's really exciting to me because as a practitioner, we were just starting to figure out what data meant and how to use it and whether or not it could help us improve what we do. So in the scheme of understanding education, that whole element is pretty new to us. Within the past 10 years, I'd say that thing has just exploded.
How important does that become in the school districts versus the university?
I think it's really important in the school district, although we've had a conversation that one of the challenges, districts would like to see research done on programs, things they've implemented. Does it matter? Does it work? Is it worth the money they invest? We put $1 million in 2 years ago to a tutorial program before and after school. I'd like to know if that had an effect worthy of $1 million. That'd be good to know. But the districts don't have people that are very good at doing research, so we look to the university and say, is there anybody that would like to evaluate that program for us? And if they do that evaluation, is there a way they can benefit by advancing knowledge in the field of education? So one of the things sites would look to in the future is trying to help coordinate and create better opportunities to research in the public schools and have a symbiotic relationship with it. The Ed Support does a lot with programs that we have. For example, we have a science, engineering, technology fair that coordinates that. And then professional development is my role. I work a lot with the people in the school districts who are over curriculum and instruction in offering and promoting professional development in terms of reading endorsements, math endorsement, Principals Academy, different things. Andy?
So if a graduate student, one of our graduate students was looking for a school-oriented project, who would they contact in sites to start opening that door for cooperation in, or helping the districts to solve?
Yeah,
their
that's a great
problems?
question. I can think of a person who came to me recently, Bryant Jensen, in Teacher Ed, came, and he's doing some research on, I can't probably define it very well and maybe do injustice to what he's trying to get at, but he's looking at factors that help Mexican, specifically Mexican students succeed in public schools. And what are some of those factors? So what we talked about is linking him up. He's doing the research in Wasatch District. So maybe pop in and talk to me, or talk to Steve Barr or Lynette Christensen. We all have different roles we play in sites that we can direct you to someone. Every single school district has a director of research now that deals with research questions. And one of the things that we could do is help align you with that person and say, this is some of the research I want to do. The challenge we have here, and this is a big one, is sometimes what districts want done, nobody wants to do, and what you want to do, the districts have no interest in. So it's trying to find a common ground where we link those research elements together to say it's a win-win. That really is still a challenge that we have. Okay? This just shows you the structure and some of the things that are going on in sites. You can see some of the ways we connect. Kennedy Center coordination, Chinese Flagship Center, instructional coaching, literacy, ELL symposium, endorsements, Principals Academy. You come down, arts initiatives, then you come down to UCOTE, the University Council on Teacher Ed, annual reviews, education preparation program. Just helps you see, these are some of the things we're doing with Positive Behavior Support Initiative, the K-School partnership stuff, doing some literacy. But if I were to tell you, this is the area that I think we're fairly weak in as a department, and we'd like to do better. One of the things that we're talking about, though, is just the connect. The sites has the potential to be the bridge or the connecting between some of these different entities. And so we say we're prepared to help if we can in terms of working on research. This just gives you a little sense of some of the main objectives that we're dealing with in sites. The arts is a big piece. Callie Phlox is working with the arts group, and she does a lot of training of existing teachers and in teacher preparation so that we get more arts, especially in our elementary schools. There are not very many schools that have specialists, so it's looking at models and preparing teachers to figure out how to integrate the arts. That's an example. And then these are some endorsements that we offer, reading, math endorsement, gifted and talented endorsement. Principals Academy is a wonderful experience. I get involved with that, but working with principals on specifically identifying the key factors in building a culture of student-centered learning and a culture of achievement. What does that look like? And then working in terms of designing programs. I'm using design a lot on purpose, trying to pique your interest. Designing programs that change the outcomes of students. There's a real powerful program that was implemented about 7 years ago by a doctoral student in BYU called Latinos in Action. Latinos in Action has gone into schools and built a sense of pride and purpose and commitment with Latino students who are often put on the fringes of an educational experience, and now they have purpose. And those are the kinds of things that get happening that build our community and make us better places.
Could you dwell a little bit, MTSS has been showing up here. Could you
Yeah.
kind of orient these guys to what that is?
You bet.
Also talk about the work of PLCs in the schools.
Okay, good. Professional learning communities, I'll take that on first, because all 5 school districts, we had assistant superintendents in a meeting about 2 months ago, and it was their assistant superintendents, their directors of school services, student services, and others. And I said, I want you, when I count to 3, to raise your hand and put up fist to 5, with 5 being really tremendous and fist being 0. How strongly oriented is your district in professional learning communities? So this is a room of 30 people. On 3, they all raised their hand. Every hand was a 5, except 2, and they were a 4. So what I'm telling you is the orientation for professional learning communities in the school districts is extremely profound. It's been around now for about 10 years in the school districts, and it's creating collaborative teams that work together to develop their standards. They have common assessments. They answer basic questions of what to do with students that aren't learning. They have intervention strategies that they work on. And MTSS fits into this, as I explained PLCs, because that's now looking at interventions that deal with social and emotional challenges. We have an academic intervention piece, and we have a social and emotional piece. And we're saying sometimes the academic piece, there's a weakness there because there's a social or emotional issue that the student's dealing with. And to fix this, we've got to fix that.
For those that don't know, MTSS means,
Multi-tiered system of support. Okay, multi-tiered meaning it, multi-tiered, tier 1 would be doing it within the classroom. What can a teacher do within a classroom? Tier 2 is saying there needs to be a little more attention to a specific student, more attention to get them through a problem. Tier 3, we've got some real serious challenges. Extremely important that we focus on specifics and get a plan together on what we'll do for that student. So multi-tiered means you work through the classroom, looking beyond the classroom and into some specifics. Often special education you'll find their work nested in the 3rd tier.
which is
But
where the
not all.
IEP comes in.
Yeah, with an IEP. But in the past, this was a challenge. I don't know what time you end, so I'm yakking like crazy here.
About 10 till?
Okay, good. So in the past, with special education, often there was a sense that that's the special ed teacher's job to get that child figured out and work with them, especially on a more profound level. If a child had an IEP where they were with a special education teacher for 3 hours a day, you'd say that's not my job to help them. That whole thing has been thrown out. Everybody's now on board saying, what do we all do together collectively? PLCs has dramatically changed the culture and the thinking within schools and school districts. At a secondary level, here's an example of a PLC. It might be the teachers that teach ninth grade English, or it might be the history teachers that teach U.S. history. And they come together and agree on what is it we want students to learn. They ought to be able to learn this. What do we want them to know? How will we know what they've learned? And that deals often with formative assessments. The future's bright. If any of you are going into design and assessing, that's a big piece. And what will we do if they don't know it? That gets at the intervention piece. And then there's one last piece of the PLC that's really critical, and that is, what do we do if a student already knows what we're teaching? How do we enrich their experience so that they can go in depth and become experts in some area? Those are the questions of the professional learning community that we deal with.
How do you incentivize, or how do districts incentivize teachers to become involved in PLCs?
Well, for the 5 school districts within the partnership, the truth is it's become such an embedded piece of the culture. Initially, we have in administration a framework called loose tight. So you can draw an inverted pyramid this way and then a regular pyramid, and somewhere in the middle sometimes you have to figure out where that is. Tight in Alpine District was everyone will participate in a professional learning community. That's not optional. Loose, you can answer your own questions on what you think students ought to learn. You can create your own ways of teaching that concept. So you create loose, tight, fit. You say, no, certain things, it's not optional. And what has happened is teachers have gotten so enamored with collaboration and what it's done for them in terms of teaching that now you couldn't take it out of school without probably having a rebellion.
When do they meet in those groups?
It's built into the school day, and typically there's a structured period of time, but you see each district has their own time set up within our partnership. Monday afternoons, they release students early. Friday afternoons, an early release, and then teachers stay. It depends on the school district, but it's built into the day. And to capture the same amount of time that students still have in learning, they would add 15 minutes to 4 days a week so they could capture an hour to release students on 1 day a week. That's an example of how you create a structure. So that built into the system pushed the agenda forward. And then there was some experimentation that's really been beneficial. We started to carve out pieces of resource, money, to say we're going to let you collaborate in the summer, 5 days, write a proposal on what you would get done, what you would do. All of a sudden we have teachers doing some amazing things in the summer through their collaboration and getting paid for it. And then we started to say 5 days isn't enough, how do we carve out 10? If I could tell one thing to the legislature right now, I'd say, let districts have money to support professional learning community collaborative time and stand back and watch innovation. Because if you're just dealing with the structure of day-to-day instruction, checking papers, keeping up with it, you miss out on those opportunities to have the dialogue that enhances and innovates within your profession. So we're so hopeful that at some point there'll be a legislative allocation of dollars infused back into the system to provide days and opportunities for teachers to collaborate. Andy?
You know, there's an interesting model in medicine of doing this also. Intermountain Healthcare has been recognized recently for its excellence in providing medical care at low cost but high quality care. And I saw one documentary that compared IHC's approach to Los Angeles, California. And California was more expensive and less quality. And so the idea is that you don't just have a doctor anymore operating in a silo, or a bunch of doctors operating in a silo, in their own silos. But what you have is a team of professionals who comes together, each one with their own set of skills and insights, and they talk together about how to proceed ahead, what the policies are going to be, and sometimes about specific types of patients and their care.
Yeah.
So there's this
Thanks for
idea
that
of
example.
a team coming together to pool their knowledge, rather than people trying to, when I was a sixth grade English teacher, seventh grade English teacher, I had 6 periods of 30 students per period, and I didn't come out of my classroom except for lunch and going home. And all of a sudden, you started feeling isolated over a period of time, like you're sitting there with your own problems, and there's no avenue for talking to other teachers, or no avenue for new inputs to what you're doing.
Yeah.
And you just start feeling this burden on your shoulders that this is a wonderful idea.
In honor of the 75th anniversary of The Wizard of Oz, the song Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead, I will sing it this way. Ding dong, isolation is dead. You can no longer be isolated in a school. You cannot do that and function effectively given the direction we're going with collaboration. So, Andy asked me a couple of questions. I'm not going to deal any more with this. I'm just going to take a couple of thoughts that Andy asked me to say. What do districts need? Who's who in the district? What are some of the research things? So let me throw out just some, I jotted down some thoughts I had to answer Andy's question. Number one, here's just some research ideas. Man, we need to research more the Hispanic population and what helps them be successful. What creates problems for them? Where do we see those problems locally? Including things like Latinos in Action. Why did that change? And how has that changed the way kids in the Mexican culture feel about being in our schools? How have perceptions changed about Latinos? What are the factors for dropping out? We lose a lot of kids. You know what? It's considered to be highly successful if you're graduating 80% of your 9th graders that start 9th grade. Now, some of those kids disappear and you never know, and you have to count them as dropouts. They just disappear. That might be because they move to another state or another country and they don't leave anything behind. So that's a tough statistic. But gosh, that'd be great to get a handle on, a little better handle on it, and figure that out, especially within our partnership. What's going on with teachers thinking in terms of how they're using data to drive their instruction? You want to talk about design, let's start with the brain and how the brain thinks about what I need to do next, and how I interpret what a student needs, and how do I give that student what they need. That's pretty intriguing to me. So that whole thing of data, it's new in our field, in education. I used to get test results back the second week of October for the class I had the year before. And by then it was like, yeah, I hope you guys succeed where I failed. We are starting this MTSS process up at the university from the ground level. We had people in the school district say, we don't even know what MTSS stands for. So we had an initial meeting to launch the idea, this is what it is. That would be an early thing to study and look at. We've got a little program called Anatomy Academy. We're in a collaboration with the College of Nursing and with an anatomy professor. And they go into impoverished schools and teach kids how to be healthier. Because impoverished children eat differently than wealthy kids. They don't eat fresh fruits and vegetables. And they tend to eat poor nutrition. That'd be some interesting stuff, how all that relates to learning. Did you have a hand?
I have a question.
Okay, I'm good. Do you want me to take it right now?
No.
Okay. Intervention effects. What are we seeing really works when we talk about an intervention? Can we identify the key interventions that change kids' trajectory for achievement? Those are cool thoughts to think about. How about volunteerism? I'm working with the United Way. They're saying we want to understand how we can help muster more volunteers in the school. And I brought in a group of 8 principals and said, how do you use volunteers? And they weren't very effective in saying these are the best practices. That would be a heck of a thing to figure out sometime. What about flipped classrooms? What are we finding out about flipped classrooms? It's pretty new. Who's using it? How's it working? What doesn't work? By the way, there are studies on this, but we don't have a lot of studies, and we need to branch out and explore more. How about online credit and what's going on with credit earnings? Can we study that a little bit? We found with some of our online high school kids that it would take them 2 years to earn a credit in a class. They wouldn't finish. Delana has probably figured out a system to change that. But that's a question. What do we do to make sure that when we use online education, do we have actual data that says this is highly effective? Where are the innovators, and who are they, and what are they doing? Where do we see innovation? Out of the PLC work, innovation is flourishing. People are trying new things and thinking new ways. And how are we researching that, or how are we telling that story? And then we get into that whole program evaluation, tutoring, spending money on this or that. The value of recess. I always loved recess with my kids, talk about nurturing pedagogy. But that's disappearing. And what's going to be the effect if we don't have recess for kids? What about the Common Core? We're implementing this massive, massive core change across the United States in 45 of the 50 states. What will that do to children in special education? Yeah, we're raising the expectations big time. Will that have some pretty significant effects? What will that do in terms of engaged teaching and engaged students? Well, I just threw a bunch of ideas on, but I think there's a real opportunity for all of you as you pursue your graduate degrees in the direction you pursue to find ways to change and improve and help us grow, help us get better at what we do with kids. It pays to have a well-educated society, and it pays to not have students dropping out. It pays to have less prisons and more graduates. So this is all something that's of great value and great import as we think about the future of education. I didn't get a chance to talk to you about who's who in the district and how do you go about working with them and high-level priorities, but you get the idea.
We'll just give you your phone number. How's that?
Okay. It's been great being with you. I can see the clock, and I know I've gone past time, so I apologize for that. Plus, the battery's about out.
Well, we're good.
Anyway, you may have questions. In the interest of sparing you that, I can stay up here for a while.
Can you come down and have some soup with us now?
No soup for you? Are you?
We have a soup kitchen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no soup for you. So,
Yes,
thank
I'd be glad to. I'd be glad to come and have soup. Thanks. It's fun. Fun to be with you.